Evening. There are now 12 days until the general strike against Congress. This is a general strike against Congress, the duopoly, politics as usual, all the things that are wrong with our political structure. And the American Union, unionizing as voters, is a way that we can fix our political structure without changing any laws or rules, but just by being willing to work together, committing to work together and to vote together outside of the two-party system. Now, that can be that can raise some red flags for some people who are pretty committed to the two-party system that we have. And so tonight, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the wedge issues that Congress and the political parties use to keep Americans divided so we don't work together. But first, start these sessions off with reciting the preamble to the Constitution as a reminder of our mission statement, our responsibilities, our duties as Americans, both individually and collectively. So you're invited to join me. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Now, those five duties, that are listed in the Constitution. Tonight, we're going to get into Title II, Ensure Domestic Tranquility. And the way that, and the specific demand of the general strike is that Congress put our crowdsourced legislative package, the Blueprint for a Better America, on the president's desk within 10 days, no later than October 26th. Now, this legislative package does three main things. It ends poverty, ends mass incarceration, and ends the endless wars. There are more than 50 different policies that are within this legislative package, but they generally fall within those three planks. And tonight we're going to talk about ensuring domestic tranquility and crafting a truce over the wedge issues of guns and abortion. Those don't fall into those three planks, but they are a separate issue by themselves. The strategy of divide and rule has been around forever. We, the people, are the marginalized millions. We are numerically superior. And there's no way that the entrenched interests with their millions and billions of dollars that they can throw into political campaigns, there's no way that they can outvote us if we agree to work together. But one of the ways that we're divided is with these wedge issues. In my studies of Gandhi, it was interesting to learn that in the last years of the British Empire ruling India, they actually bribed Muslim religious leaders to preach against the Hindus to try and purposely keep that country divided so they couldn't cooperate. And as a result of that division, it turned into, I don't think you'd call partition a civil war, but unnecessarily conflict that led to the death of 1 million people. And in the United States, no reasonable, rational adult should want to see any sort of conflict that would lead to widespread deaths or other, we don't want to see any widespread conflict among the American people. There are calls for this. There are calls for a national divorce, which is one of these many things that might make a good soundbite, but when you try and actually put details on paper, it doesn't work out. It's hard to actually put the details on paper and say, what exactly does it mean to do these things? So the reason that the framers, what they were thinking of when they put this in the Constitution to ensure domestic tranquility was that the year before there had been an insurrection. They were a country that was it was triggered by a floundering economy that was crushing people under debt. The problem was that Congress couldn't really get anything done because passing legislation took a supermajority. If these things of floundering economy, insurrection, ineffective Congress, if they all sound familiar, it's because, once again, we are in the fourth iteration of the Phoenix cycle. And America is going through these problems again. But this time, rather than dealing with societal problems through the violence of the Revolutionary War or the Civil War, and lacking the lack of gerrymandering that would enable one party to achieve a supermajority in Congress, the way that we dealt with the economic troubles of the Civil War, of the Great Depression, where Democrats were able to pick up a supermajority in Congress, and thus be able to pass FDR's New Deal. Since we're not in a position to do that, we need a new strategy. We need a better way to do it. And the way to do it is not to put one political party in the other, or the other in charge, not the framers, not the Republicans, not the Democrats, but instead we the people. We the people can be the political power that moves us into the next version of America, America 4.0, one crafted on respecting and recognizing the humanity in all of us and creating a framework for everyone to succeed. But to get there, we've got to find a way to deal with these wedge issues, because this model of offering all incumbents, Republicans or Democrats, re-election if and only if they put this legislation on the president's desk before the election, or if they refuse, offering their major party challenger our block of swing votes if they support these demands, including support being willing to re-elect the incumbent if the incumbent meets the demands, if they support the general strike on October 15th and these demands. That when we, as we talked about yesterday, and Martin Luther King's 6 principles of nonviolence. Nonviolence is for courageous people. That means stop playing the lesser of two evils game. And so there's a chance that we might elect the greater of two evils. And for some people who the issues of guns and abortion are very important, what happens if we, this is how they keep us apart, is each party says, oh, the other party's going to take your guns or abortions away. You've got to elect us. We are the lesser of two evils. We're the only ones who can protect you. Whether or not that's true, it's a common fear that people have. So how do we de-escalate that? And the way is, what Title II does is creates a truce, an armistice, where for 10 years, every side gets something, every side gives something up, and then that's it. We the people agree not to fight, and instead adopt a common sense truce on these issues. We codify it into law as part of the blueprint. And so this take it or leave it for Congress. If they take it, then they will enact the truce as well. And so we can stop fighting as a country. We can stop fighting with each other and instead focus on what are the problems we need to solve. How do we build a better America? And in 12 days, you'll have the opportunity to be recorded as supporting the blueprint for a better America as the way to move forward. So let me start off with section 201, and that is the findings. Let me share my screen here. And all right, we got the blueprint for a better America. We've finished establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility. Okay, section 201, findings and purpose. The Congress finds the following. In the 21st century political battlefield, two of the most polarizing issues are guns and abortions. Political parties use them as wedge issues, dividing Americans by stoking fears that the other party will take away access to one of these things. 2, proponents of restricting access to guns and abortions are a minority of the American people. According to Gallup polls in 2021, just 19% of Americans supported making all abortion illegal, and 80% oppose a handgun ban. 3, proponents of restricting access to guns and abortion are motivated by the idea of preventing needless deaths. Other provisions of this legislative package will reduce the demand for abortion, as well as reduce gun deaths, which are mostly suicides. 4, by declaring a truce on these issues for a period of time where both sides give and gain concessions, America can better focus on addressing the root causes of needless deaths. The purpose of this title is to promote domestic tranquility by removing certain inflammatory legislative proposals from consideration for 10 years. Just briefly, let's just talk about that just a little bit more and sort of get the lay of the land. What is the political landscape look like? And it looks different than it does when this legislative package was introduced back to the Phoenix Congress back in January of this year. Things have changed. Most obviously, in June, the Supreme Court handed down the Dobbs decision and overturned Roe versus Wade. Now, the biggest takeaway from the Supreme Court striking down Roe versus Wade is that Congress dropped the ball, that Congress let the judicial branch set abortion policy in this country for 50 years. And this goes back to Congress failing to act. Congress is the legislative branch and is supposed to be setting policy, and they dropped the ball. It was their responsibility to do it. They let someone else do it. And when things changed on the Supreme Court, they decided to go a different way. Congress is the reason, that is the roadblock, is the obstacle to so many things in making America functional again, which is why it is essential that we crowdsource the legislative process and force them to act by offering them the carrot of electoral success if they do, but still holding the stick of electoral defeat if they refuse. So the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, which had previously found that abortion was a constitutional right. Look, I was born after that was decided. It had never really been questioned. It had just always been the way that it was. And I guess, though, if you look at the logic, I guess it is kind of a stretch to see that is a constitutional right. And whether or not it is, it still comes back to the question of what sort of policy has Congress set? And in this case, very, very little. So the Supreme Court kicked things back to the states and said, okay, you guys are the laboratories of democracy. Do what you will. Because Roe versus Wade took that away from the states and said, you're not allowed to do these things. And instead, again, the judicial branch wrote abortion policy for 50 years and crafted these different tiers based on trimesters and things like that, stuff that Congress should have done, but the judicial branch did when Congress failed to act. And so the landscape today, it looks like we got about 20-ish states that have banned or near bans on abortion. And so what sort of truce? And there's there is discussion, there is talk, there is a proposal by Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina to enact a nationwide abortion ban. I'm sorry, not ban, restriction on access to abortion. That's the political landscape when it comes to abortion. Now, what about with guns? Guns, man, we had a terrible year when it came to mass shootings. Gun deaths continue to be at record highs. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but we're talking like 45,000 a year. This year we saw racially motivated shooting in a supermarket in Buffalo, New York, and then almost immediately after in Uvalde, Texas, a mass shooting at a school. And it was a brutal year, but it gave Congress the, I don't know, you want to call it the political courage to do something on and pass a bipartisan gun safety bill. Now, what did it actually do? The NRA was there during the negotiations, and they gave their approval to pass this. So for people who are looking for larger changes, it didn't do it. It gave some money to the states to help them run crisis intervention programs. It closed the loophole in the domestic violence law, and it encouraged states to include juvenile records in the National Instant Criminal Background Check system, and went after some individuals who hadn't previously registered as federal firearms licensed dealers, increased funding for mental health programs and school security. I mean, these are all good things, but not real changes in national gun policy. And so that's where the political landscape stands. Again, this is how Republicans and Democrats keep us divided. They demonize the other party. They say the other party is going to take these things away. You've got to elect us to protect you. They make a caricature of the people, and they say Democrats, they want all the abortions and none of the guns, and Republicans want none of the abortions and all the guns. And the truth is that the vast majority of Americans are nuanced. That we recognize that it's not all black, all white, not all or nothing. That there is a gray middle area that just makes more sense to the majority of Americans. Yet, because of the fact that we have a two-party system, thanks to Duverger's law, this is the way that the battle lines get drawn. And the American Union is an opportunity for the marginalized middle to come together and say, look, guys, we're going to be the calmer heads. We're going to stop fighting over this issue. We've got more important things to worry about. We're going to stop fighting. We're going to negotiate a truce, and we're going to make you guys take this deal or be willing to lose. So as a union of swing voters, it's great when we can pull in independents and third parties and things and other disgruntled voters. But for those people who do feel strongly about these issues, we need a way to de-escalate things so that they're willing to cast their votes for either a Republican or a Democrat. So we're getting questions. All right, we got a question. Why is this called ensuring domestic tranquility when this seems to be one of the most polarizing things in the legislative package? And for a couple of reasons. One, because that's the name of the duty that's in the Constitution, that we, the people, are established the United States in order to ensure domestic tranquility. The long answer is because this is what's stopping us from working together. This is, if you're looking for a reason to not work together, if you're looking for something in this legislative package, and you want to say, nope, that's a deal breaker, not going to do it, veto the whole thing, keep poverty, keep mass incarceration, keep the endless wars, don't let this happen, you could probably find something in Title II. But if you want to fix these problems, if you feel a duty to address these things, then this is the place that we can do that, where we make compromises in order to look. Successful relationships, you know what they have, and they have is compromise. Is that adults recognize that they don't always get everything that they want. Compromise is an essential part of making relationships work, and we, the American people, need a better relationship with each other as a country. That requires compromise. And so one of the purposes of the Fast for Peace is to demonstrate a willingness to compromise, because fasting and compromise are two sides of the same coin. They're willingly giving something up. And the reason you do that is to get a better outcome. We can have a better outcome. The framers did it with the Constitution. None of them liked everything that was in the Constitution. They were all willing to compromise because America was worth saving. And it still is 235 years later. This seems like a good place to talk about the Fast for Peace. My own personal commitment to seeing this effort succeed is a 3-week fast. My last meal was on September 24th. So I'm into day 10 now, and my weight is at 184 pounds. I am still feeling great, and I got another, I don't know, 200 and not quite, a little less than 300 hours to go until the evening of October 15th. And if you're willing to join in for the last 24 hours and join the Fast for Peace, starting on the night of October 14th, finish your dinner, and then skip breakfast and lunch on October 15th, just drink water for that 24-hour period, and then have dinner again on the night of the 15th. That's the Fast for Peace. It's not hard to go without food for 24 hours, but it takes an intention. And when we, the people, all demonstrate a shared intention to bring peace to the political process, we will have the political leverage to make it happen. All right, I think that does it for section 201. Let's get into what the actual components of the truce are. And section 202, we deal with abortion first. First is codification of the Hyde Amendment. The Hyde Amendment, if you don't know, is a restriction that has been tucked into the budget every year since 1977, and it restricts the use of federal funds for abortion, with exceptions for rape, incest, or to protect the life of the mother. Now, this year, President Biden proposed a budget without the Hyde Amendment. It ended up getting put back in. But again, this is one of these things where we have the opportunity to fight, but we could refuse that. And so let me share my screen again, and section 201 would codify the Hyde Amendment. This language comes from 2013 S-142, the Hyde Amendment Codification Act. And look, this would prohibit federally funded abortions. Again, I just think it's worth mentioning that this is a popular policy in the United States, that about 57%, if I remember correctly, 57% of Americans support not using federal funds to fund abortion, that people recognize that this is a matter of choice and a matter of conscience, and that our collective spending shouldn't be used to fund abortion. So majority of Americans already support this, but prohibiting federally funded abortions, no funds authorized or appropriated by federal law, none of the funds in any trust fund to which funds are authorized or appropriated shall be expended for any abortion. No funds authorized shall be expended for health benefits coverage that includes coverage of abortion. And the term health benefits coverage means the package of services provided by a managed care provider or organization pursuant to contract and other agreement. Okay, 302, treatment of abortions related to rape, incest, or preserving the life of the mother. The limitations in section 301 do not apply if it's a result of an act of rape or incest, or in the case where the woman suffers from a physical disorder, physical injury, physical illness, including a life-endangering physical condition caused by or arising from the pregnancy itself, that would, a certified physician, place the woman in danger of death unless an abortion is performed. And these are the sorts of things the stories that we are hearing from the states that have banned abortion in a number of cases without these common sense exceptions that women are having to flee the states in order to get, in many cases, life-saving treatment. And so the Hyde Amendment has all of these exceptions. Look, the Hyde Amendment is one of these policies from the 70s, and there's a lot of policies from the 70s that should be re-examined. This is definitely one of them. But for 10 years, this is something that we can compromise on. You know, the framers punted slavery for 20 years. They said, okay, Congress shall make no law relative to importing enslaved people until 1808, for 20 years. And that itself was a compromise. The proposal was to have it be the year 1800. And the slave states are like, how about a nice round 20 years? And the rest of the framers like, okay, what is it? What will it take for us to make a deal? That was a compromise. But the Constitution did not make any effort to address the underlying problem of slavery, that somehow it was okay for one human to own another human. This is not the same thing. This is an attempt to deal with the underlying causes that lead to a woman choosing to engage in an abortion outside of rape, incest, or to protect their health. And why do women do that? Well, if you ask, 2/3 of them say they can't afford the baby. You know what else? We don't have paid family leave in this country, like almost every other country on the planet does. And so, look, we can fix that. The blueprint does, in fact, fix that. We can take those problems off of the table. The goal should be that when any woman takes a pregnancy test and sees that she's pregnant, that it brings on joy. That is a much better metric of how we are doing as a society than how many dollars and cents were exchanged in a given year. How happy are the people in it? Look, abortions are at a 40-year low, even though our population has gone up by 1/3. So let's find out how low we can go by addressing the root causes like poverty and continue to bring that number down, not by cutting off the supply, as many states are doing, but by going after the demand. And then in 10 years after the blueprint is passed, we can decide if the Hyde Amendment is still needed or not. That is the first part of the truce. That is Section 201. Section 211. Now we know what, that's the abortion side. What about on the gun side? And on the gun side, we have H.R. 8, the bipartisan background checks of 2019. This was passed by the House, sent to the Senate, and it just sat there. Now, according to a March 2021 poll, 84% of voters, including 77% of Republicans, support universal background checks. Let's go ahead and look at what exactly is in this. Well, before, yeah. Let's go ahead and look at this here. All right. Firearms transfers. All right. So this amends the United States Code, puts a new section in. It shall be unlawful for any person who is not a licensed importer, manufacturer, or dealer to transfer a firearm, unless one of those people has first taken possession of the firearm for purpose of complying with this. On taking possession, shall comply with all the regular requirements of this chapter, 922 of Title 18, and do all the appropriate background checks. And if the transfer for firearm won't be completed, then the transfer of the firearm described in subparagraph A will not be completed for any reason. The return of the firearm shall not be considered a transfer of the firearm for the purposes of the chapter. Okay. All right. That's the basic gist of it. Okay. Is you've got to use a federally licensed agent to do a universal background check for all gun sales, all gun transfers, except let's look at what the exceptions are. All right. First, shall not apply to a law enforcement agency or any law enforcement officer, armed private security professional, or member of the armed forces to the extent that the officer, professional, or member is acting within the course and scope of employment and official duties. Okay. So we've accepted that as a society, these people all carry guns, and so we've got a big giant exception for them. B, a transfer that is a loan or bona fide gift between spouses, between domestic partners, between parents or children, including step parents and their stepchildren, between siblings, between aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, grandparents, grandchildren, if the transfer has no reason to believe that the transferee will use or intends to use the firearm in a crime or is prohibited from possessing firearms under state or federal law. So dad wants to give his teenage son a .22 rifle. Does he need to do a background check before he can put that rifle under the tree? No. B has an exception for transfers within families, as long as, quote, there is no reason to believe that they're going to use or intend or use it for a crime or that they're prohibited from possessing firearms. As long as you don't have any reason to believe that you would be doing something wrong or enabling something wrong, it's exempt. It's a loophole. You don't have to get go through the process of a background check. All right, C, transfer to an executor, administrator, trustee, or personal representative of an estate or trust that occurs by operation of law upon the death of another person. So grandpa died and he had a big collection of guns, and he wants to give it away to business partners, former employees, friends, whatever. Okay. So that transfer from the that transfer to an executor, administrator, trustee, or personal representative of an estate or trust that occurs by operation of law upon the death of the other person. So going from grandpa's possession to the estate's possession doesn't require a background check. D, a temporary transfer that's necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm, including self to harm, family members, household members, or others, if the transferee only lasts as long as immediately necessary. So this includes the harm of domestic violence, dating partner violence, sexual assault, stalking, and domestic abuse. If you've got a woman who's being stalked, threatened by someone, and she goes to her friend who has a gun collection and says, look, I'm in danger. I need a gun to protect myself. And he can give it to her for the duration of the situation until he can give it to her for the duration of the situation without running through the process of the background check. So big emergency loophole to protect people from harm. Included in here is including harm to self. So if you think that your friend is suicidal, and you go over there and say, look, I'm concerned about you. Can I hold on to your guns for now? And they say, okay, you can. That means that no background check is required for you to hold on to someone else's guns to prevent harm to self. Okay, these are the loopholes these are the exceptions that are crafted into the law. A transfer that is approved by the Attorney General under Section 5812 of the Internal Revenue Code A temporary transfer if the transferee has no reason to believe that the transferee will use or intends to use the firearm in a crime or is prohibited from possessing firearms under state or federal law, and it takes place in their possession. So here's the other ways that you can loan someone a firearm without triggering the background check. At a shooting range, shooting gallery, some places for target shooting, or while reasonably necessary for the purposes of hunting, trapping, finishing. If you have no reason to believe that the transferee intends to use the firearm in a place where it is illegal, and you have a reason to believe that the transferee will comply with all the licensing and permitting requirements. Or just any time you're in possession of the presence of the transfer order. Okay. So again, anytime that if I'm the gun owner, I can share my guns with people in my possession. And the background check, none of these transferee restrictions come into play. So those are the exceptions that are crafted into the background checks law. And then there's a few paragraphs here on regulations, things like that. And 4 is it shall be unlawful for a licensed importer to transfer possession unless they've been notified of this prohibition under paragraph 1. That's the firearms transfer restrictions. And such other person is certified that the other person is provided with this notice on a form prescribed by the Attorney General. Okay, so this is what it means exactly to do universal background checks. And as long as I've got the screen share going, I'm going to go ahead and hit sections 212 and 213 because they're super, super short. 212 is just some technical and conforming amendments, and 213. All right, I've heard this rumor. Read this rumor on the internet where people say, oh, every time they propose universal background checks, there's always a national gun registry in it. No, there isn't. And HR 8, which has already passed the House, and the Blueprint for a Better America explicitly say so, that no firearm registry is authorized. Nothing in this subtitle or any amendment made by this subtitle shall be construed to authorize the establishment directly or indirectly of a national firearms registry. That's not what this is. It says so right in the law. And paragraph 2 here clarifies that you also can't construe this section to interfere with the authority of a state to enact a law on the same subject. So if a state already has the ability to enact some sort of firearms registry, this section doesn't change it. All right. So what is the symptom that we're trying to address here? What are we trying to do? As we talked about, abortions have gone down for decades and decades. However, annual gun deaths have gone up in the 21st century along with the population. In 2020, more than 45,000 people of all ages, all races, all genders, 45,000 people lost their lives to gun deaths. And so how do we address that? And just like with abortion, this legislative package addresses the drivers of these gun deaths in several ways. First, 57% of those gun deaths are suicides. And what causes these deaths of despair? Let's see, that can include things like financial problems, drug abuse, depression, difficulties with relationship. Poverty exacerbates all of these conditions. And so by establishing a firm economic floor with universal basic income, we're going to improve America's overall mental health, and we're going to reduce suicides. About 1,000 of these gun deaths come from the police. The police kill about 1,000 people, or killing 1,000 people a year. And so by mandating de-escalation techniques, we are going to reduce needless deaths in that way as well. The blueprint is trying to put forward solutions. We're not the universal background checks, gun bans, again, are trying to tackle things from the supply side. But the real problem, the real way forward is to address the demand side. What causes people to use guns to take people's lives? Now, the other part of this is the mass shootings. And look, it is a small percentage of the overall percentage of gun deaths, but it is a very visible portion of these gun deaths that come from mass shootings. And unfortunately, this is not a new phenomenon in America. We have been here before. 80 years ago, during the last iteration of the Phoenix cycle, we were at a time of great wealth inequality, of income inequality, just like we are again today. And we had problems. Sebastian Junger, in his book on Tribe, on Homecoming and Belonging, he observed, quote, "The first time that the United States suffered a wave of rampage shootings was during the 1930s, when society had been severely stressed and fractured by the Great Depression." So look, we are going to address wealth inequality with universal basic income and combined with a value-added tax, and we can patch the fraying fabric of our social bonds. We can bring people together. We can bring guns down. Now, there's another issue that contributes to the number of gun deaths that we have in this country. And about 4 years ago, after the Parkland school shooting, Matt Taibbi in Rolling Stone, he wrote an article called "If We Want Kids to Stop Killing, the Adults Have to Stop Too." And he looked at the ways that militaristic societies that glorify the military have higher rates of gun deaths. He wrote, "Deep-seated cultural ideas about the virtue of military supremacy and the political efficacy of violence, that they were related to the rise in mass shootings. This madness won't stop till we stop believing that killing makes us strong, or that we can kill without guilt or consequence just by being precise. When beliefs like that actually make us is insane and damaged, and it's no surprise that our kids too are beginning to become collateral damage." Look, our third duty under the Constitution is to provide for the common defense. And in the Blueprint for a Better America, that means ending the endless wars. And by striving to end the endless wars and reducing military spending, reducing military glorification, we can meet our duties and at the same time demonstrate that reasonable adults can work out their differences rationally and without violence. And so that's the way that we can approach this problem, that once again, we can reduce gun deaths without necessarily having to pass laws that would bump up against the Second Amendment to the Constitution, and instead focus on the demand side, focus on solving these problems. All right, let's get on to the next part, section 221. How do we, if we work out this truce, how do we enforce it? And make sure that, if a Republican or Democrat majority tries to, can't undo this truce that we worked out. And so here's what we've got in section 221. Criminalizing introduction of gun or abortion bans. It shall not be in order in the House of Representatives or the Senate to consider any bill, joint resolution, amendment, motion, or conference report that would meet any of the following conditions. So a prohibition on their consideration of these things. Amending or repealing Chapter 4 of Title I, that's the codification of the Hyde Amendment. Amend or repeal subsection 922T, that is H.R. 8, the universal background checks. 3, it can't consider anything that would prohibit the manufacture, sale, or possession of a firearm. Firearm means any weapon, including a starter gun, which will or is designed to or may readily be converted to expel a projectile at the action of an explosive. The frame or receiver of such weapon or any firearm, muffler, or silencer. So no gun bans can be proposed or considered in Congress. And 4, anything that would prohibit or restrict access to abortion. So a 15-week national abortion restriction could not be considered by Congress. Violation of this section shall be a Class B misdemeanor. It shall be a criminal offense. And so if Senator Lindsey Graham wants to break the law that Congress and the president have enacted, that makes it a criminal offense to introduce a 15-week national abortion restriction, he can be sentenced to between 5 and 30 days in jail. Next time Congress decides to take a month-long recess, he can serve it in county jail as an act of civil disobedience and his commitment to trying to ban abortions or restrict abortions. And on the Democratic side, those who want to ban guns have the opportunity to do the same thing. Look, we can work out a truce. Now, stop sharing screen here. The question comes up, is this constitutional? Can we punish members of Congress for, can we make this a criminal offense for Congress to do that? And the answer is, like, I'm not a lawyer, but yes, I do believe it's constitutional for 2 parts, two reasons. The first is the Constitution itself. It says in Article 1, Section 5, Clause 2, quote, each house may determine the rules of its proceedings and punish its members for disorderly behavior. So Congress, the House and the Senate, have the constitutional authority to make up their own rules and to punish members for disorderly behaviors. Now, can we pass a law that changes the rules in one of the chambers? Well, we did this less than a year ago in December 2020. We passed a law that changed the Senate rules to sidestep the filibuster in order to raise the debt ceiling. So, yeah, we have demonstrated that we can pass a law that affects the rules of the House and Senate. We've established that the House and the Senate have the authority to set whatever rules that they want, and that they have the authority to punish its members for disorderly behavior, Class B misdemeanor. So yeah, so we have the authority to do all these things. Now, a little bit more about the punishment. Well, the Supreme Court ruled in 1906, Burton versus United States, that, quote, Congress has the power to make it an offense against the United States for a senator or representative after his election to do certain things. And in this case, it was about compensation. The guy was, I guess I don't want to say taking bribes, but anyways, he passed he violated an anti-corruption law. And so they went after him with criminal charges. And the Supreme Court said, that's okay. It is not repugnant to the Constitution, and it does not interfere with the legitimate authority of the House of Congress over their respective members. So the Supreme Court has said that it's okay for Congress to punish its members with criminal offenses. So that's why I believe that Section 221 is constitutional. Might it be challenged in court? Probably, but those are the reasons why I believe that we, the people, can in fact work out a truce and write it down and make it stick. Which leads us to Section 222. I'm just going to read it, not even bother to share my screen. Quote, Section 221 of this subtitle is repealed 10 years after the date of enactment. This is a truce. This is not a permanent state of affairs. This is a 10-year truce. After 10 years, Congress can again reconsider the Hyde Amendment, reconsider background checks, reconsider the prohibition, the criminal prohibition on introducing these things would automatically go away, and they could introduce gun and abortion bans after 10 years. But for 10 years, we can agree to stop fighting. You know how much energy, how much that we waste in fighting over these issues, when instead we could just stop and we could just focus on the bigger, larger societal issues that are affecting all of us, that are affecting our children. Look, 45,000 gun deaths is a terrible number, but we lose 250,000 people a year that die prematurely as a result of poverty. There are bigger issues. There are bigger issues with our environment. There are drug overdoses that kill or are killing over 100,000 Americans. 45,000 Americans a year to gun deaths is not nothing. It is a serious number, but we have other issues that we can and should address. We can put this one to the side for 10 years with a reasonable truce. Yeah. And so again, this is the truce. This is the kind of thing that the framers worked out in enacting the Constitution, because reasonable, rational adults, a normal, healthy, functional relationship involves compromise. And so Americans who feel a duty to do what the framers laid out in the preamble, who want to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty, and not hope that somebody else will deal with it the way that Congress hoped that somebody else would deal with abortion policy. Instead, are willing to personally step up and say, yes, I want to be a decider. I want to be a problem solver. I want to be part of the solution. That is what the American Union is about. That is what the American Union empowers us to do, to leverage our votes in a way that gives us the maximum possible influence over Congress by coming together to say, look, we don't have to fight over these things. So the way that you can do it is on October 15th. Join the general strike. Observe a day of fasting, refuse to spend any money, and refuse employment if at all possible. And on Twitter, use the hashtag Fast for Peace or hashtag VoteAU. Also on October 15th, contact your congressman or congresswoman directly by phone, by email, and say, look, you have 10 days to put this legislative package on the president's desk. And if you don't do it, me and all my friends might just kick as many of you out of office as possible. These are the terms. This is a take it or leave it offer for Congress and for the American people. And we can build a better America by working together, by unionizing as voters outside of the two-party system. So I hope you can learn more on our website, anamericanunion.com. Please sign up to be a dues-paying member for $4 or $5 a month, and you can be part of the solution. All right. I think that's going to, seeing no questions in the chat, that's going to do it for this evening.